Should you buy a PlayStation 3 in 2020? The PlayStation 5 is finally upon us, but there's a different Sony console that's been occupying my mind lately. See, nearly 14 years ago, Sony unleashed the PlayStation 3 on the world, and things were never the same again. Kind of. This thing was $600 at launch. Yikes, but at that price, you got a console that was HD capable, that could play Blu-ray discs, and that got such great, incredible exclusive titles such as Uncharted 2, The Last of Us, and by far the worst version of Sonic 06. Seriously though, it's a great console, but should you still buy one in 2020 if you haven't already? Well, I'm Jamie from The Gamer, and in today's buying guide we're going over hardware, software, and accessories to not only decide what the best PS3 setup is, but to decide if one is right for you. Development on the PS3 began back in 2001, shortly after the PS2 launched. It was first shown off to the public at E3 2005. That version sported both a silver color scheme and a boomerang-shaped controller, and people hated it. Not all was bad with that demo model though. Along with it came tech demos of both Metal Gear Solid 4 and an HD version of Final Fantasy VII. Goodness, it sure would be a shame if it took 15 years for anything to come of that FF7 demo. Anyways, the PS3 was also set to be the first game console to ever support HDMI out. This meant that, out of the box, games would be playable in HD. When the PS3 launched a year later in 2006, reception was mixed to say the least. Folks were impressed by how incredible the games looked, and Sony made a big deal out of the new tilt features on the 6-axis controller. The system could also double as a fancy new Blu-ray player, which was a big deal back in 2006. However, the $600 price tag and rumors of games being difficult to develop for it thanks to its advanced architecture made it have a slow initial uptake. This was also the same year that the Nintendo Wii was launched, and though that system was much less powerful, it only had a $250 price tag. That would help propel it to a large early sales lead. Granted, that $600 PS3 price tag is for a model with a 60GB hard drive. You could get one with only a 20GB hard drive for $100 less. The PS3 was an impressive piece of tech for the time though. I remember being much more impressed by the leap from PS2 games to PS3 games than I was by the later jump from PS3 games to PS4 games. In fact, I'd argue many titles released for the PS3 still look great today. The launch model of the PS3 is notable for being backwards compatible with both the PS2 and the original PS1. While every PS3 ever made is backwards compatible with PS1 discs, only certain PS3s released within the first few years after launch could play PS2 games. And even then, some of them were more compatible with PS2 games than others. Without going too far into details, if you see a PS3 that looks like a launch model, then it can play PS2 games as long as it has one of these model numbers. Launch model PS3s were also special because certain other operating systems could be installed onto them. Most notably, several Linux distros were known to run incredibly well on the PS3. However, this feature was also used to mod PS3s for piracy reasons, and Sony would take note. They would remove this feature from all later PS3 revisions. And then, likely just because Sony doesn't like people having nice things, they would patch it out using an update in 2010. Even though it wasn't a feature many folks use, a lot of people were outraged by this. This was a feature that they had felt was promised with their system, and that feature had been taken away. People were pissed on principle. There are also several known hardware issues with the launched PS3. While Sony never had anything that plagued their systems as bad as the red ring of death on the Xbox 360, some PS3 owners would eventually encounter the dreaded yellow light of death. There are also rumors of launch model PS3 disk drives being finicky, but oddly enough, I don't know anyone who ever had that issue. The only PS3 I ever had the disk drive fail on was actually the PS3 Slim I owned as a teenager. Speaking of which, after a slow first few years of sales, Sony decided to give the PS3 a sexy new redesign, release it at a new low price, and promote the hell out of it with a series of ads featuring Kevin Butler. Launched in 2009, the PS3 Slim was perhaps my favorite looking Sony console until the PS5 was unveiled. I don't know what it is about it, but it still looks weirdly modern to me, despite now being over a decade old. From my experiences as well, this is also the most common PS3 out there. By this point, the initial 6-axis controller had also been replaced with the superior DualShock 3, which was basically just the same dang thing as a PS2 controller, but wireless. It even had rumble support. This also came standard with pretty much every PS3 sold after that first year or so. The PS3 Slim may be the best looking PS3, but I'd argue the most reliable model is the final revision. This is the PS3 Super Slim, which was released in 2012. This was basically Sony's attempt to give the PS3 one last push before the PS4 came out, and it is very, very obviously cost reduced. The plastic used on it just feels cheaper than on the other models. There's a slide-out disc tray instead of a mechanical disc drive. It also looks oddly like a grill. Cheap as it feels, that disc tray revision makes it easily the most reliable PS3 out there, as discs just can't get stuck inside of it. For those who want to buy their games digitally, which is still an option as the online PlayStation Network store is still around, there's also a version of the Super Slim that comes standard with a 500GB internal hard drive, which is rather nice. That's also the exact model I've been showing off throughout this video. I got this for around $100 at EB Games a few years back, and it served me well. However, most major retailers don't sell these anymore, so if you're wanting a PS3 nowadays, your best bet is either visiting a mom and pop game store or just getting one off of eBay. But before you make that decision, do also know that hardware isn't the only thing to consider here. After all, what's a console without its games? The PS3 had some phenomenal defining titles. God of War 3, LA Noire, The Last of Us, Assassin's Creed 2, the Uncharted games, and even the likes of Wipeout Fury. All of those are incredible titles with a lot of fun on offer. All of those are also titles that were either PS3 exclusive or originally best known on the PS3. Yet, all of those are now titles that have all gotten ports to newer platforms. Tons of the great games that helped define the PS3 have since gotten ports to the PS4. While the PS3 versions are most definitely cheaper in most cases, if you're wanting more than just a cheap entry point into gaming, you'll be missing out on the best versions of them. Just look at LA Noire here. That thing is even on the Nintendo Switch now. Some of these upgraded versions even add in additional content. For example, sure, you could hunt down the PS3 version of Persona 5, but you'd be missing out on the extras added in Persona 5 Royale on PS4. Along with that, though online services are still available on the PS3, they're likely going to be wound down over the next few years. Online play is free, yes, but PS Plus members used to be able to get monthly free games on the PS3. Yeah, that ended a couple of years back. That's not to say there's no longer any great PS3 exclusives though. In fact, I have a holy trinity of sorts of games that are still only playable on PS3. The first of these is 3D Dot Game Heroes. This is basically the best Zelda game out there that isn't a Zelda game. It's an overhead adventure where you play as a blocky hero with a sword who goes on a great quest to save the kingdom from evil. You can fully customize your character to a ridiculous degree thanks to the built-in editor tool. You can even play as a tank if you want. Plus, the writing is witty and charming, and the level of polish is absolutely unreal. It's easily one of the most underrated games From Software has ever made, and it's a damn shame it's never seen a modern console port. Gran Turismo 5 is also one that I absolutely love, and though we've since gotten both GT6 and GT Sport, I'd argue that this was the peak of the series so far. There are nearly 1,100 cars that are drivable here, with there being a variety of great tracks and even an editor that allows you to make your own. This is another one that is still only available on the PS3, and is still an absolute blast in 2020. Finally, I'd like to mention one of the most controversial games of that console generation, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. This was supposed to be Sony's answer to Super Smash Bros., and let me be the first to say that it just doesn't hold a candle to Smash. But at the same time, it's still a really enjoyable little party fighter that's especially fun with friends. Sure, it's missing the likes of Crash Bandicoot from its roster, and yeah, the version of Dante here is from the failed Devil May Cry reboot, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game at all. If the gameplay you're seeing here looks cool to you, maybe pick this one up either on PS3 or Vita. And if you're intrigued about the history of this title, then I'd absolutely recommend checking out the Golden Bolts documentary Smashed: What Happened to PlayStation All-Stars. While there aren't a ton of exclusives left on the PS3, there are still a crazy amount of games that can be enjoyed on it, exclusive or otherwise. As PS3 stuff is dirt cheap nowadays, I think this also makes it a prime entry point for aspiring game collectors. And if you fall into that category, definitely stay tuned as we dive into some weird PS3 accessories. As this is a buying guide, I figured we should end off by looking at 3 very odd PS3 accessories. The first and most obscure of these is the PS3 Play TV. Long story short, back when the PS3 launched, most people still watched TV via cable. In fact, the PS3 really didn't offer much in terms of streaming services until Netflix began to take off. Released in 2007 exclusively in Europe, the Play TV would let you record TV shows directly to your PS3's hard drive while you were playing games. There is a similar device released in Japan called the Torn, and honestly, I'm sure this was pretty neat at the time. Maybe it's just because I have childhood memories of TV shows being recorded to VHS tapes, but this seems like a very cool step in the transition from traditional TV to streaming. On the more ambitious end of the PS3 accessory spectrum is the PS3 3D display. Released in 2011 along with PS3 compatible 3D glasses, this was a gorgeous looking 24-inch monitor that would allow you to play PS3 games in cinema-esque 3D. It can also be used outside of 3D mode as just a standard gorgeous looking 1080p monitor, but 3D was the real selling point here. Sony was really pushing 3D hard for a good few years, and all sorts of games that have absolutely no business being in 3D had a 3D mode. Goodness, even Sonic Generations could be played in 3D. I think this was just an odd attempt to try to compete against the then new Nintendo 3DS, but really, it's not cool enough to be a major selling point for me. Finally, we need to talk about PlayStation Move. After the Wii waggled its way to success, both Sony and Microsoft tried to jump on the motion-controlled casual gaming bandwagon. Microsoft's attempt was the Kinect. The less said about that thing, the better. Sony's attempt was PS Move, and this was both technically a failure and technically a success. PS Move controllers are basically just Wiimotes with glowing balls on top. They're comfortable to hold, sure, but I think it's fair to say that if I want to play Wii Sports, I won't play Sony's much less charming sports champions, I'll just play Wii Sports. I think many folks feel the same, as PS Move didn't sell great and the PS Move exclusive games quickly found their ways into bargain bins everywhere. But that was not the end of PS Move. Years later, Sony would launch PlayStation VR for the PS4. And it just so happens that Sony's VR controllers were the PS Move controllers. They're literally the same exact controllers, and they're even compatible with both the PS3 and the PS4. In that sense, PS Move actually did manage to successfully find a niche. Really, none of these accessories are must-buys for any but the most diehard of PS3 fans. In my opinion, all you need to have fun with this system is a couple of controllers and a copy of any of the great games mentioned throughout this video. I think it's easy to see why I still love my PS3 over a decade later. I think it's no secret that I think the PS3 is a great console. But with everything we have just gone over in mind, we need to answer the question posed at the beginning of this video. Should you buy a PS3 in 2020? Let's be fair here. The PS5 is here and the PS4 is soon going to be on its way out. Stores such as GameStop overwhelmingly don't even sell PS3 games anymore, and as mentioned before, a lot of the great PS3 games out there have since gotten PS4 ports. If you want one nowadays, you'll have to turn to a place such as eBay or a local retro game store to get one. Most PS3 models will only run you about $70 to $90 US, and the majority of games are dirt cheap. If you have a PS4 or are getting a PS5, you can probably pass up on getting a PS3 unless you're a collector. But if you're a gamer on a budget, a PS3 would be a good investment, with hours of fun available for a pretty low price. Despite the lack of PS2 backwards compatibility, I'd say that the best model to get nowadays is the Super Slim. Yeah, it's also the ugliest PS3 model, but the non-mechanical disc tray means you won't have to worry about discs potentially getting stuck inside of it, and it can still play PS1 games as well. The PS3 is still a great console, and one that can provide hours upon hours of fun. On that note, will you be buying a PS3 in 2020? How about a PS4 or a PS5? Let us know down in the comments section below, and while you're at it, subscribe to The Gamer for more great content like this. I'm Jamie, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.